Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. My name is Iris, and in this episode, I'm talking about how guilt sabotages our boundaries. So many of us believe that boundaries are only needed in our romantic relationships, but that's simply not true. There's a saying that goes, how you do anything is how you do everything. I think I heard that originally from T. Harv Eker, who had I think he wrote a book. It's called Millionaire Mindset. Anyways, he said, how you do anything is how you do everything, which means that if you have weak or no boundaries in your romantic relationships, chances are good that you have weak or no boundaries in other relationships that you have. So, relationships that you have with your boss or coworkers, your friends, and even family members. So, the nice thing about relationships is that they show us the parts of ourselves that we need to heal. And fortunately, we live in a very loving universe that is always showing us the parts of us that need to be healed. And they're also presenting us with the people that we can have relationships with to help us with that. So, I'll share a personal story of how guilt and boundaries showed up for me in my own family. So, last year, one of my adult girls moved with her young family to live closer to me. And naturally, I'm super excited about that. I've always had a strong bond with her, but her tween and teen years were really painful for her and also for me as her mom and for our whole family. I always had pangs of guilt though that would show up for me at different times in her young adult life, but it was really easy to push that down and not have to deal with it because, well, out of sight, out of mind, right? Like we become really good at just pushing that stuff away. But here's the problem with this. Eventually those feelings need to be looked at. Suppressed feelings and their associated emotions cause blocks in the flow of our lives. They are also stored in our bodies, which eventually will manifest themselves in dis-ease, causing disease. So the feelings that we have, they they have associated emotion with them. And it's those emotions that get buried deep within that will manifest into something unwanted if we don't look at them and clear them out. And they just block the flow of our lives. So, what I want to address in this episode are the blocks in the flow of our lives as it relates to boundaries. There are a couple reasons why someone would struggle with boundaries. One is the overcompensation that we do because of how we feel guilty. And the second one is the fear of what we will lose. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about overcompensation because of the guilt that we feel. And then the next episode, I'll talk about the fear of what we will lose when we have boundaries. So I'll continue on with my story here. So when my daughter and my grandkids moved close to me, naturally, I wanted to help them as much as I could. However, my help was not really helpful. It was helpful short term. And the other thing that it did is it caused me to overgive of my time and my energy. And eventually I became mentally and emotionally exhausted. I knew how my overgiving was affecting me, yet I continued on because I wanted to help her become stable so that she and her partner could start creating something wonderful for their young families. Sounds innocent enough, right? Sounds like something any parent would want to do to help their children. But it came to a boiling point when they announced that they were thinking of moving back to where they had moved from. There was a reason that they moved to be closer to me. So when they announced that they were thinking about moving back, I was naturally really, really upset about this, because who doesn't? What mother doesn't want their family, their kids, their grandkids to be closer to them? So besides the obvious that I wanted them closer to me, I also started to dig a little deeper to understand that there was something underneath all of that. It wasn't that I had poured so much of myself into helping them. It was actually something buried much deeper. So, because of her troubled teen years, I didn't have her at home with me from the time she was 15 years old. Not on a consistent basis, anyways. So, having her here with me meant that I had a second chance, another opportunity of being there for her in a better way, because I actually felt tremendous guilt that I had failed her as a child. Now, normally I'm the queen of boundaries, and I'm always teaching others that we have to take care of ourselves first and we give from the overflow. I didn't do that. So the words, "I'm not able to help you with that," were never said. It was always yes, regardless of what I had going on internally for myself, what I needed to do in terms of taking care of my mental and emotional health, regardless of anything that I had going on in my physical environment. I would rejig my life so that I could help them. I also so often jumped in to offer my help and wisdom and insight, basically my opinion, without ever being asked for it. And this is really interesting. This is, you wouldn't often think that this is a boundary, but it is actually a boundary. The reason I did this, though, is that, and the reason we do this is because we don't want to have others experience pain or hardship. So we we give our knowledge, we give our insight, we share our perspectives, our point of view, things like that. When it's unsolicited, it's not so cool. People don't always want to hear our unsolicited points of view. But at the base of this is that when we jump in to save other people, also a thing of boundaries, we deny the other person the opportunity to figure things out on their own. We actually make it our responsibility to fix what they actually are supposed to figure out for themselves. And with her, you can imagine, moving several hundreds of miles away from where they came from. The transition on such a big move is, it's really stressful. So I wanted to help her, and I didn't want to um, have her experience more stress. But interestingly enough, her stress also triggered things in me that I needed to look at. And just on a side note here, when you look at the things that trigger you in other people, you start to see patterns within yourself that are also interwoven with that other person as well. It just kind of speaks to really how connected we all are in the fabric of life. But regardless, these are classic examples of having no boundaries, and they're also classic examples of how we overgive to try and save others, which in turn stalls their own growth. And it's through our pain that we actually experience our growth. So when we try and deny somebody else that experience, as painful as that is, we're stalling their own growth. So I recognize my pattern of overgiving and having no boundaries in this situation because of the guilt that I experienced. And interestingly enough, I had also experienced the same type of over compensating for things that I felt guilty about in a couple of other past relationships. Remember, I said how we do anything is how we do everything. It shows up everywhere in our lives. So we want to make up for the harm that we believe we've caused another person. But in my opinion, people pleasing and overgiving is not the way. So here's what I did to heal this. The first thing I did was to forgive myself. Forgive yourself. I have always said people are doing the best they can with where they're at in their lives and the tools and the awareness that they have. Your intention is never to hurt someone, but sometimes actions and things said do hurt others. It doesn't make you a bad person, and the fact that you have the insight that you may have potentially hurt somebody shows that you do have inner awareness, and that is a very good thing. So forgive yourself. Forgiveness is for ourselves. It's not for the other person, although it does help the other person. And here's how. So apologize if you have the opportunity. In AA, one of the steps in their recovery is to apologize to those that were impacted by their addiction, the addiction. And there is such tremendous healing in an apology. And it's been my experience that most times the other person has already forgiven you, or they appreciate the heartfelt apology. In my case, when I had the opportunity to talk to my daughter about how I was feeling, how I had all of this guilt, and why their announcement of them moving back had impacted me so much, when I expressed all of this to her and I apologized, for things that happened such a long time ago, but it still is etched in my memory and in my heart, and feeling that I had let her down. My opportunity to really have that conversation with her and hear her response, which was, you don't have to worry about that just never even comes up in anywhere. I just never think that you actually ever let me down in any way. So for me, she had already forgiven me, and in fact, it wasn't even a thing for her, but she appreciated that how I felt about it. So the other times is the other person has no idea what you're talking about because they didn't see the situation in the same way that you did, which is really interesting. But regardless, that apology and forgiveness, it releases both of you from any karmic cord that is keeping you bound to that experience. And when you think about that, it releases the karmic cord. There's an energetic cord that is keeping you tied to that experience. And when you've got that karmic cord attached to you, you can't have free flow in your life. So the third thing that I did, and that, I always recommend this to anybody that I'm having a conversation with, any client that I'm speaking with, is to take a deep breath and blow the past away. We can't change the past. You can't change your past. And we have to be able to do that, take the experiences of our past, do the healing, do the releasing, do the forgiveness, apologize when you need to, and move on to the next great adventure in your lives. We're really funny beings. We like to anchor ourselves into the past and hang on to all of the stuff of the past. And what it does is it really blocks the flow of life. It's like we drag not just one anchor, but so many anchors of people that have hurt us, relationships that have failed, where we were taken advantage of, all of those things. And, largely we need to take responsibility for our part in that experience as well. It's, as I said at the beginning, everything, all of our learning experiences comes from the relationships that we have. It's never just one person having the experience by themselves. It takes two people, which means there are things that we're contributing to that experience. And it shows up in the way of, not trusting our intuition, blatantly ignoring red flags. We know that they exist, and we ignore them anyways, right? So we have to acknowledge and take responsibility that we participated in this experience as well. But as I said, growth happens from the experiences, the painful experiences that we have. We grow from blissful experiences, but the majority of the significant growth happens through the painful experiences. But what we don't often have the opportunity or the awareness of is that we have to forgive and release and let go and just breathe, take the experience, take the learning from that, and move forward in our lives. So a couple weeks ago, I wrote an article on overcoming guilt. Another one about overcoming guilt. Guilt seems to be a common theme this month. It's called, I'll leave a link below this recording, but it's called Recovering from Relationship Guilt, because even in our relationships, sometimes we do things, as I mentioned, that we feel guilty for afterwards. So we do need to release that guilt in those romantic relationships as well. So I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, like, comment, share, subscribe, share it with anybody you feel might find this helpful. And until the next episode, be well, be happy, be healthy, and sending you lots of love.